This happened around 10 years ago when I was 14. At that time, I lived in an old farmhouse, way out on a country road. Our house was surrounded by cornfields, and our nearest neighbors were 2 to 3 miles away. Living there was good because not many people came to our door to sell things. One night, only my mom and I were at home. We were baking treats to sell and raise money for my little brother's Boy Scout group. My dad and brother were away, helping my uncle with some cows, if I remember correctly. We were busy in the kitchen, chatting and laughing. Soon we heard someone knocking on the door, a regular, everyday knock, like tap, tap, tap. "Mom." She mumbled to herself and took off her dish gloves to open the door. I felt a little nervous in my stomach, but I thought it was just my usual worries. As my mom went to the door, the person outside tapped again, but this time it was like a beat, tap, tap, tap. My mom stopped and turned back, looking pale. She walked back to the kitchen and went to the window facing the porch. She went to the side where you could see the porch really well. Mom pulled the curtain a bit to peek without anyone seeing her from outside. Then she went to the other side of the window to check the driveway. I had stopped what I was doing because, at this point, making pie crusts didn't seem that important. Mom's eyes got big when she looked outside. Then, she closed the curtain and stared at the floor. Her face showed both anger and fear. She took my wrist and led us to the closet, asking quietly if I had my cell phone. I did. Then, from the closet, she took out my dad's special Louisville Slugger baseball bat. Suddenly, the person outside banged on the door really loud. I gasped a little. Mom looked at me, telling me to be quiet, and took my arm. We went to my parents' bedroom, and she locked the door and windows as we walked. Mom took my phone and started dialing while handing me the bat. She sat me down on the floor, where I'd be out of sight from the door, and opened the closet to get the gun case. She spoke quietly on the phone, but I was really scared and couldn't concentrate on what she was saying. She took out my dad's shotgun and loaded it fast. I looked at her, frightened, when she hung up the phone. She pulled me up again and led me out of the bedroom. We sneaked over to the other side of the house where the bathroom was. Mom gave me my phone and gestured for me to go inside. She put down the gun and looked at me with both hands on my shoulders. "You have to listen. Some guys are outside, walking around the side of the house." I stared at her, eyes wide, feeling myself shaking. "Why? What do they want?" "I don't know, but you have to stay in here, lock the door, and don't come out until I say. Got it?" I nodded, and she squeezed my shoulders. "I'm gonna block the door from the other side. I won't remove it until I tell you it's safe." I understood right away. I heard her push the heavy quartz chest in front of the door, a box filled with quartz from many years. I sat on the floor by the window, holding onto the baseball bat. It felt like a really long time, but it was just 5 minutes. While I sat there, I heard 2 footsteps outside the window, and 2 deep voices talking quietly. "Are they really inside? Maybe nobody's home." "No, there's at least 2 ladies inside. Heard them talking at the door." I got scared, started breathing fast, but covered my mouth with a towel to keep it quiet. Who were these people? Soon, I heard another voice. "Guys, let's go." Charlie saw cops down the road. Then I heard 3 sets of feet running toward the front of the house. I was crying a lot by now, tears pouring down my face. Was it over? Were they leaving? After a few more minutes, I heard a man's voice in the house. I started to panic, huddling into the bathroom corner. I heard my mom's voice on the other side of the bathroom door saying, "It's me. The sheriff's here. They're gone. I'm moving the trunk." I stood up, unlocked the door, and opened it. The sheriff and my mom were moving the trunk out of the way. I ran to my mom's arms quickly, and we stood there hugging. The sheriff said more officers were chasing the van, and he needed to ask me and my mom some questions. My mom nodded, and we went to the kitchen where the air smelled like burnt cookies. The sheriff asked us questions, and that's when I found out what my mom saw. When she looked out and saw the man knocking at our door, she knew something was wrong right away. He was dressed casually in gym shorts and a tank top, not what a salesman or someone from a church would wear when visiting. So my mom thought maybe his car broke down or something, and he needed help. She looked out at the driveway and saw something that scared her. There was a van in our driveway, parked so my mom's car couldn't leave. There was a man in the passenger seat, and another leaning towards the front of the van, talking to the passenger. But my mom noticed, even though both were still, the van was slightly rocking, like there were more people inside. While my mom and I were talking to the sheriff, a deputy came in, and he looked really pale. He looked at my mom, the sheriff, and me, and he said, "Sir, we caught up with the van. They lost control and swerved into the ditch, actually. Are any of them hurt?" "No, they're okay, but we have them in custody." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "There were 5 guys in the van. We asked them why they were here and why they were walking around your house. And? What did they say?" "They claim to be vacuum salesmen, sir. A team selling the product they made." The sheriff scoffed a bit. They took my mom outside and told her what they found. She came back inside, crying and holding on to me. After that, they called my dad, and he rushed home. My other uncle, a really big guy, stayed that night just in case. My mom didn't spare any expense on home security and taught both of us kids how to shoot and load a gun. My aunt and uncle gave us one of their German Shepherd puppies. Mom had to train him to be a guard dog, but he was a goofy and affectionate pup when not on duty. However, even with that, Mom still wasn't reassured. My brother and I ended up going to self-defense lessons to make her feel safer. It wasn't until a few years later, while we were making cookies and homemade candy for a Christmas party, that I finally asked my mom about what was in the van. She was surprised that I asked, but knew I would find out eventually. So, what was in the van? They found rope, tape, burlap sacks, and even sedatives. After taking the guys back, and hours of questioning, one of them finally broke and admitted they were having no luck catching anyone in town, so they went to rural areas. Just a few days before Christmas, my mom asked if me and my girlfriend could look after the house and take care of the dogs, while she went on a week-long vacation with her boyfriend. We agreed, and the first few days were quite normal. My mom's house is on the edge of a small town in upstate New York. It's a peaceful place, and not much usually goes on, except for occasional road work. It happened about 3 nights after we started staying at my mom's place. My girlfriend and I were just chilling on the couch. She was busy with her phone, and I was deep into playing Pokemon Shield on Switch. The clock was ticking, and it was around midnight. Suddenly we heard heavy footsteps from outside. It was kind of creepy because someone with really big boots had walked up onto the porch. The layout of my mom's house is interesting. There's a couch against the wall, and big windows on both sides of it. So from where we were sitting, we could hear and see things happening outside. On the wall opposite to us is the front porch, so this guy was right behind us. He stomped around the porch, making heavy sounds. Then he got really close to the window on the left side of the couch and grunted, "Ugh, hell," in a deep, angry voice. My girlfriend and I were frozen in place, trying to understand what just happened. It took about 5 seconds for us to snap out of it. We quickly got up and decided to turn off all the lights in the house. Then, we tiptoed to the laundry room, a place where he couldn't see us. After a little while, I felt like it might be safe to go to a different room and check if we could turn any lights back on. But when I peeked out of the window, I saw this big, burly guy shuffling down the sidewalk opposite our house. It was around midnight in a small town, and it's not the kind of place where things like this happen often. The street was quiet, and the only sound was his footsteps on the sidewalk. The guy had a plastic bag in his hands, and he seemed a bit out of place with the late hour. Remember, it's very late at night in a quiet town, so none of the stores are open for him to get a plastic bag. The guy keeps doing this strange shuffle while holding the bag. Then, all of a sudden, he starts moving really fast in a funny way, across the street toward the parking lot near my house, and then he disappears. I go back to the laundry room and told her about what I saw. Then I bring her back to the window where I was looking to see if we can find the guy again, but he's not there. We check other windows in the house to see if he's outside any of those. My girlfriend looks out her window on the other side of the house, and that's when she saw him, but he's walking away. We talk about whether we should call the cops, and then suddenly, we hear knocks on the door on the other side of the house. We rush over, and the doorknob is jiggling like someone is trying to open it, but luckily, it was locked. Then one of my mom's dogs, a small rescue pup, starts barking like crazy and growling at whatever's on the other side. He has a really loud, screechy bark, and I think that scared the person away. We called my mom to ask for advice. Then we thought about calling the cops, but around here, the cops aren't known for being super helpful, so we decided against it. My mom also told us not to bother, because she thought it might be someone who was drunk or high and didn't know what they were doing. Later I found out. It's not the first time someone showed up at our door all messed up in the middle of the night. But I'm not really sure what the guy's intentions were, and I'm really glad I didn't have to find out. I used to live with my ex-boyfriend in a small apartment in Paris. Our relationship was not good. It was full of problems, and sometimes violent. Also, I was sick and couldn't go out with my friends, so I spent a lot of time on the internet. I didn't have many friends because most of them left me when I got sick, but one day, when I had a big fight with my boyfriend, I felt really sad and lonely. So I decided to chat with random people on a website. That's when I met a guy who shared the same interests as me. We both liked playing video games a lot, and we chatted almost every day for 6 months. His name is Alex, and he knew I was in a bad relationship, even though it was a really tough one. So one weekend, we decided to meet in person, and he was okay with coming to my place. At first we were both shy, but with the help of some alcohol, we started talking and laughing together. I felt so happy that I finally had a friend to talk to. So after that, we met at least once a week, and it was a really good time for me, as we had a lot in common, and he never made me go out if I didn't want to. We helped each other out. Alex was dealing with depression and thought he was ruining his own life, so I wanted to help him as much as I could to give him self-esteem. I just wanted him to have a good time with a friend. On my 22nd birthday, my boyfriend decided to have a party and invited Alex. He was the only friend nearby, but my boyfriend also invited 10 of his friends. I wasn't happy about it. My boyfriend knew I didn't like too many people around. It makes me anxious. So I spent the whole night cooking and serving his friends. I couldn't enjoy the party. On top of that, my boyfriend embarrasses me in front of everyone. Alex came over to comfort me, as I was really upset. I shared everything about how my boyfriend was treating me badly. I told Alex that I loved my boyfriend but would break up when it's safer. It was too risky to end things right then. But while I was crying, Alex tried to kiss me. I stopped him because I didn't want more problems in my life. It was already too hard. It might sound strange, but I felt betrayed. It seemed like he was waiting for this moment to try something. But he didn't say anything, just opened the door and gave me a beautiful necklace as a gift. I said I couldn't take the expensive gift, but he left without saying anything. After that, I thought it would be better to keep some space between us. It's not fair to stay friends if he wants something more. I told him that if he wanted more, it couldn't be with me. Then a few months later, he sent me a lot of messages, like 20 of them. He said he was really in love with me, wanted to save me, and that I was his reason to live. On other end, my boyfriend got upset on me because I was getting too many texts and calls from him. It made me really anxious, so I turned off my phone and went to work. At that time, I was working in a small restaurant as a waitress, taking orders over the phone. The phone rang, and when I answered, I heard breathing at first. Then, I recognized the voice. It was Alex. Now, I felt like I was in a horror movie. I hung up the phone almost right away, but it kept ringing, like 10 times, until my boss answered. It was 7 p.m., and I was supposed to finish work at midnight. At 11 p.m., I saw him. He came to my workplace and begged to talk to me. I was so scared I couldn't talk. I ran to the kitchen, told one of my coworkers what was happening. He took over as the waiter, and I started working as a cook. Alex left after about 30 minutes. I was too afraid to go home alone, so my coworker gave me a ride to my apartment. The next day, I got over 100 blocked calls. I didn't sleep at all and was really tired, so I tried my best not to pay attention to him. Then a month passed, and he tried to come to my workplace many times, but I ignored it. I hoped he would understand and leave me alone. But when he didn't stop, I got scared and tried to report to the police, but they said it was just a guy in love, so they couldn't help. One day, I woke up to go to work. My boyfriend was playing video games online, and he got a message. It was from Alex. In the text, Alex said he loved me, that we'd been together intimately many times, and that I was a cheater and other things. I was shocked and didn't understand what was happening. My brain froze, and I couldn't react. Luckily, my boyfriend saw the blocked call. He had suspected Alex was bothering me for a while, even though I never told him, and decided to block Alex too. After that, he went to work. My boss called and said I could start 2 hours later today. It's mean. I was all alone in my apartment. I can't explain it, but I felt like something bad was going to happen, and my heart was racing. I felt sick. Then, I heard my doorbell ring. Once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. But I couldn't stand or walk. My whole body felt frozen. I could feel tears on my face, but I couldn't react. It felt like a nightmare to me, but I waited quietly. Since he had been following me for a while, he knew I was supposed to be at work. After a few hours, the doorbell rang again, but I was supposed to go to work now. It took all my courage, and I went out. It was him. He was crying. At that moment, I wasn't scared anymore, so I decided to leave, but he followed me and grabbed my arms when I tried to go down the stairs. I hit him and begged him to let me go. All I wanted was to get away and run as far as possible. He pushed me against the door and said, "If you won't talk to me, I'll go to your boyfriend's work. I'll talk to him. Then he'll hate you as much as I love you. Or maybe he'll kill me, but that doesn't matter." Now, I felt trapped and couldn't get away. I didn't want to call the cops because they didn't help me before, so I decided to agree to talk with him outside after my work. Surprisingly, he calmed down, thanked me, and left. When I got to work, I was still shaking. I told my coworker and boss everything. So my coworker decided to stay in his car after work, in front of the restaurant, so that he could help me if I needed it. At the end of my shift, Alex was there. We sat outside and talked. He kept repeating the same things he'd said a million times before. Finally, I interrupted him calmly and said that nothing would ever happen between us, that I was afraid of him. as he was making my life miserable. It seemed like he finally realized what he was doing. But then he took something out of his bag, a big package, and gave it to me. It was full of expensive stuff. I told him I didn't want to accept it. At first, he said he bought it for me and couldn't keep it because it would remind him of me. Then, he kind of forced me by saying if I accepted it, he wouldn't contact me again. So, I agreed. I was tired and just wanted to go home and sleep. After that, he said goodbye and left. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, I was sleeping at a friend's place. One of my closest friends, who used to be a coworker. It was 5 a.m. when I heard my phone ringing. I was too tired to answer, but it kept ringing. It was texts from an unknown number. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was blood. Then, there was a long text, but I couldn't read it because more pictures came in. Blood was everywhere in the pictures. So I woke up my friend, showed her the pictures, and I was shaking a lot. I couldn't understand what was happening. I received 31 pictures of mutilated arms, torsos, and legs, and in the last one, I saw Alex's face. Then my friend took my phone away from me. She hugged me, and I felt so guilty, thinking everything was my fault. Almost an hour passed without another text or call, making me even more anxious. I thought he might be dead. Suddenly, my phone rang again. I got a video of him in a hospital bed. He was trying to talk, but most of it was hard to understand, except for a few words like love and promises. Alex had tried to hurt himself. The doctors diagnosed him with bipolar disorder and a personality disorder. He stayed at the psychiatric clinic for a few months. The last news I got about him was that he's getting treatment and feeling better. Since that day, I moved to a new place. I have a new job, a new city, and a different boyfriend. Even though I'm still affected by it, I don't think Alex is a bad guy. This happened more than 10 years ago when I was in school. To explain a bit, like many students, I didn't have much money. Besides my part-time job, I did a few things to earn extra cash, and one of those was taking care of houses and pets. I really like animals, so when this couple asked me to watch their house few days, before they came back from their trip, I said yes. The person who was supposed to do it before me canceled it for some unknown reason. They told me they would pay for 2 weeks, even though I was staying for less than a week, making it a good deal. The house was really nice, but it was close to an area known for not being very safe, with crimes like break-ins and robberies happening. I wasn't too worried because, I thought nothing bad would happen to me. I was young and naive. The first 4 nights were fine, watching movies, using the jacuzzi, and just having a good time. The owners were supposed to come back on the 5th day, pretty late at night. I went to check on the dog, but then they called me around 10 p.m. and said their flight got delayed. So they were staying in a hotel and driving back the next morning. They asked if I could stay there again that night, and that was okay with me. I was already at the house, and my overnight bag was still in my car. So I called my dad to tell him my plans, because I still lived with my parents. After that, I felt tired and went to sleep. Then, around 1 a.m., I heard a window break. There was noise, and what seemed like footsteps running down the hall. The first thing I did was grab my phone and press the redial button. Because of my old Motorola phone, redialing was easy. I just pressed one button. I called my dad last, hoping he would wake up if the phone rang. Then I put the phone between the headboard and mattress, so that if my dad answered, he could hear what was happening. I had just done that when the first guy burst through the bedroom door. I could see his silhouette in the dim light, and in his hand, there was a knife glinting. When he spotted me, he raised the knife and started moving in my direction. Now, it's important for those who might not know much about South Africa and crime there. Robberies and house invasions can be really brutal and violent. People can end up getting hurt badly, or even killed, if they try to fight back or don't cooperate with the robbers. So, without even having time to think, my instincts kicked in, and I quickly lifted my legs as he approached. When he got close, I swung both legs out with all the strength I could muster. Just to give you an idea, I'm not a small person. I am 6 feet 3 inches, and back then I weighed around 220 pounds. Staying fit and strong was a big part of my routine, as I hit the gym whenever I wasn't at work or school. So when I kicked the guy, he flew and hit the wall. Thankfully, the knife he was holding went flying out of his hand. Without wasting a moment, I pounced on him, driving my right knee into his face and pushing his head against the wall. I knew my survival depended on it, so I applied extra force. The guy fell down like a heavy sack of potatoes, but before I could stand up, I heard a sound, the click of a pistol. I got really scared and couldn't move. The only thing I could think was that if he shot me, I'd rather not live with a disability or have to depend on others to take care of me. He stood there, holding the pistol to my head, and it felt like a really long time, even though it was probably less than 10 seconds. I stayed still, not moving. Then, he spoke in not so good English, telling me to lie face down on the bed. I got scared, but I figured if he wanted to shoot me, he would have done it already. So, I followed his instructions. Then he tossed a blanket over me, and I curled up into a ball against the wall. I did that so if they tried to hurt me, my legs and arms could protect my body. At that point, I forgot that I called my dad, and the first guy I kicked was still on the floor. Then another person entered the room, and they spoke in a language that sounded like Portuguese to me. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I recognized the language because we used to go to Mozambique a lot for holidays, and that's the main language there. One guy tried to help the guy I kicked, while the other guy started grabbing things and stuffing them into a big bag. Then, around this time, I heard tires screeching, and a car came really fast. The car stopped right in front of the gates, and I heard someone scream. It was my dad. The 3 guys inside the house got scared and ran out the back door, trying to jump the fence. But my dad started shooting towards them. I'm sure my dad purposely didn't hit them, because if he wanted to, he could. While I went inside, my dad called the police. It took them over an hour to arrive, giving some excuse about not having a vehicle available. At that point, I had calmed down a bit and began searching for the dog, but I couldn't find her anywhere. So I took a flashlight from my dad and started checking the yard. When I reached the corner, I saw her lying on the ground. When I got to her, my heart sank. She had passed away. Later examinations showed that she was poisoned. In my country, poisoning dogs is unfortunately a common thing when a house or area is targeted for a break-in or robbery. I was really angry and sad, but the police didn't seem to care much and barely paid attention when we gave our statements. I grabbed my bag, phone, and tried my best to secure the house without touching anything. But the story doesn't end there. About 7 or 8 months later, the detective called me. They had caught the guys, so I needed to go to a lineup to identify them. But I told her that I didn't see their faces because it was dark, and after one of the guys held a gun to my head, so I hid under the blanket and couldn't see anything. She assured me they caught them using fingerprints and would show me the evidence beforehand. It might not be the ethically correct way, but they wanted to gather as much evidence as possible against them, and you'll understand why in a moment. I went to the police station, but it's not like in the movies. There's no one-way glass or separate room. They brought the 3 guys into the room and had them stand against the wall, The one who I later found out was the leader, the one I needed to identify, looked at me with a level of hate I had never seen before in my life. He had the eyes of someone who would harm you without hesitation. His name was Joseph Dragon Sambo. After we left the room, the detective gave me a copy of his criminal record. Among other things, he had 4 counts of murder, I think 8 to 9 for attempted murder, multiple assaults, aggravated assault, over 100 cases of breaking into houses, robbery, and indecent assault against women. I was really surprised. The detective explained that if I hadn't acted quickly to take him down that night, things could have gone much worse for me. 3 days later, I got another call from the detective. They warned me to be cautious because somehow he had escaped from custody, and they hadn't caught him yet. But I didn't worry too much because the robbery wasn't at my house, and I had a different car, so he probably couldn't track me down. Plus, I got my firearm license and carried my pistol with me all the time. I didn't hear anything after that until about 2 years later, when I bumped into the detective at the grocery store. We started chatting about the case, and she shared that he was killed during a home invasion. With a pistol in hand, the owner fired a shot, hitting him in the stomach, and then another shot in the neck. Unfortunately for him, the emergency services and police were slow to respond. As a result, he bled out on the living room floor of that person's house. When I was 20, I went to an anime convention with my friends. My 21st birthday was just a month away, so my roommates said it was okay for me to have lots of drinks, as long as I stayed in our room or left with someone I trusted. I was staying with a big group of people in a nice hotel room. I've been to many conventions before and usually had a good time, except for a few times when people were creepy about my cosplay or just not very nice with me. Later on night, when the party wasn't so fun, I drunkenly left the room and went to explore the main lobby. And that's when I met Steven. I don't know how old he was, but he seemed like an adult, maybe a bit older than me. We bumped into each other at a table with manga books, and he said he liked the manga I was holding. But I'm not much of a manga reader, I just like the pictures. I'm more into anime. Anyway, I let him talk about the story for a bit, because he seemed nice. I didn't really say much, just things like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." I thanked him for the info and then wandered around for about an hour. Eventually, I decided to go back to my room. When I got there, my roommates and I took 2 shots each, and I ended up lying on the couch. That's when we heard a knock on the door, and things were about to get interesting. The music and chatting hushed down, like a silent rule when there's a knock, just in case it's the convention security checking in on our party. Then the friend who opened the door said, "Veronica?" "Yeah, she's here. Come on in," my friend replied. There was this moment of quiet, and then my friend called my name saying, "Hey, someone's here for you." I was curious, wondering who it could be as I made my way to the door. At that time, I was pretty drunk, and there were 2 things I didn't realize. First, I never told Steven my name. Our talk lasted, like 5 minutes at most, and top of that, I didn't share any info. Plus, my name is a bit complicated and not easy to say. Then I thought he just recognized me and my roommate, but I didn't even give him our room number. We were on higher floors in the fancy suites area. To reach our room, you needed to use a different elevator than the one for regular hotel rooms. But honestly, I didn't even think about that. I went to the door, and Steven was there with a smile. He asked if I wanted to take a walk, and in my drunken state, I said yes. I thought he was just this kind of shy anime fan who wanted someone to hang out with. So, while we walked, he told me about this anime where the main character was doing bad things to the girl he liked. I tried looking up that anime later on Google, but I couldn't find anything exactly like what he said, except for a few yandere anime. Now, I started feeling uneasy because the hallway was empty, and we were just walking with no plan. Then he started talking about his favorite serial killers, how he was really into crime stuff, and followed a lot of cases. That set off a big warning sign in my mind, and I thought it was time to head back to my room. But then, he stopped walking and stared at me, and he said, "I know a cool place we can go. If you use the staff elevator, we can go to the very top of the hotel. It's really pretty." That made me a bit nervous, but he seemed so sure about it. All of a sudden, he started breathing weird, and his hands were shaking. I told him no, because I still had some sense left in my head. Then, he grabbed my arm really hard and tried to pull me towards the staff doors. I pulled back, telling him to stop, but he said to be quiet. I managed to break free from him and started running. He chased after me, telling me to stop. I was almost crying and wondering why the hallways were so empty. Finally, I ran into a group of girls. They could see the fear on my face and quickly pulled me into their group, asking about my hair and makeup while putting their arms around me. I was crying and told them what happened. When I looked back, Stephen was gone. I didn't see him for the rest of the convention, but because of him, I stopped being so friendly at cons. Just so you know, I called him Stephen, but I never got his real name. I told the convention security about him, and my roommates and friends stuck with me using the buddy system for the rest of the event. Honestly, I truly believed, based on what he said and how he acted when I tried to get away, that he planned to take me to that nice view and do something really bad. This happened about 4 years ago. I'm 21 now and don't live in that neighborhood anymore. Yesterday when I visited my parents, I saw my neighbor, and it reminded me of what happened. Let me give you some background. I live in a third world country, and our neighborhood is considered one of the worst, but only for people from outside. Despite this, we are quite friendly with each other. Even those who have been in jail are usually friendly. We have many people with mental health challenges in our neighborhood, and Happy is one of them. My mother and I call him Happy because his name literally means that, and we always joke around saying, "Oh, Happy, are you happy?" because he usually has a smile on his face. Well, unless someone upsets him, which happens about 3 times a year. I stayed in that place for about 19 years, so I know him well. He lives with his 2 brothers. One sells fruits, and the other drives a taxi. Happy doesn't have a job because he has a mental illness, and I think it might be a kind of schizophrenia, but I'm not sure which one. All I know is that he doesn't function like others. So you can't have a normal conversation with him about sports, news, or anything really. His sentences just don't make much sense. I should also mention that our country doesn't take mental illnesses very seriously, as we only have 3 places in the whole country for people with mental health problems. So there's no way for him to get good treatment, and people just call him crazy. It's really sad. My dad used to be friends with him and his brothers, but not anymore. My dad used to give him some money so he could buy cigarettes, and he knew that Happy's brother, the taxi driver, had to support his 2 kids in another city, and the brother who sells fruits didn't make much money. Happy used to help carry groceries sometimes, and Dad would also give him some money for that. So, since I was a kid, I only knew him as someone who was very helpful and friendly. I always smiled at him, and he would smile back at me. But when I turned 15, he had changed a lot. He still had a smile on his face, and he would stay outside in different shady spots all day, smoking. I used to wake up around 7 a.m. to go to school, and he was always there, wide awake, just smoking. It seemed like he either didn't sleep or woke up way too early. We would see him in a place that takes about half an hour for us to reach by car, so you can imagine how long it took him to get there on foot, He looked restless, but mostly he just stood there and smoked. This went on from early mornings to very late at night. His behavior changed in a disturbing way. He started staring at me with this forced and creepy kind of smile on his face. When I walked by him, he would always watch me without turning his head. He even walked backward while staring, and I noticed he did this every time. Sometimes, he would walk backward and press his back against walls like he was hiding or something. His whole attitude changed a lot, and he started getting mad more often. He would yell things that didn't make any sense and stomp angrily toward his house. Now, let me tell you what really happened to me. Like I mentioned, he always kept his eyes on me. I was 17 years old, and on the day this happened, I was at home alone. I stayed home to study while my family went out. He probably knew I was alone because when they left, I saw him standing in his usual spot, staring at them as they drove away. When it was lunchtime, I went to buy some things to cook. I saw him standing next to his brother, who sells fruit at the local market. I went to the market to get vegetables and meat. The veggies were close to where Happy was, but the butcher was a minute away. As I paid for my meat and put it in my bag, I looked up, and there was he just staring at me. I didn't think much of it, so I turned right and walked towards home. But he was right behind me again. But still didn't think it was a big deal, because our houses are right next to each other. I passed his house, waiting for his footsteps to stop. But no, he was still right behind me. I looked, and his eyes were still on me with that really creepy smile. I didn't really care, because I thought he was just going to his usual spot to light a cigarette or something. I never felt like I was in danger in my neighborhood, so I don't get anxious easily, especially with him. Even during his angry moments, I didn't think he was the dangerous type, so no warning signs popped up for me. I went through the main door from the street and walked in the wide hallway that had one door where an old woman lives. I passed her door, turned right, and went up the stairs to my house on the second floor. I heard someone come in through the main door, and in the hallway, I thought it was maybe one of the neighbors from the third floor. The footsteps were fast, so I figured they were in a hurry. I turned to look at the bottom of the stairs to see who it was and make space for them to climb quickly. But to my surprise, it was Happy at the bottom of the stairs. I stopped suddenly, and that's when my heart started pounding really fast. I asked, "Happy, what are you doing here?" But he didn't say anything. Instead, he started running right toward me, taking 2 steps at a time. I tried to climb faster, but he grabbed my foot, and I slipped. My right arm and knee hurt a lot from the fall. He was pulling me down the stairs, messing up my back too. But with all the adrenaline in me, I started kicking to free my ankle from his grip and screamed at him to let go. I also yelled for help, hoping a neighbor would hear me and come to rescue. With my free leg, I kicked his forearm to make him release me. I kept kicking and shaking the other leg too. Luckily, I got free, but I couldn't turn around, so I started climbing, scared he might follow me into the house, and who knows what he might do if he got inside. I just wanted to kick him, hoping he'd lose balance and fall off the stairs so I could get inside my house. I kicked and kicked, screaming, but it didn't work. It felt like a long time, but it was probably about 5 seconds, and then I heard the door of the old lady downstairs start to open. Happy heard it too, so he ran away. He passed by her house, but she saw him. Then she called my name and asked if I was okay. She stuck her head up from the bottom of the stairs, still calling my name. But all I could do was cry in fear and pain. My elbow was bleeding. She asked me to come into her house so she could help with my bleeding. I said it was okay, and I would take care of it myself, but she insisted, and kept calling me to come down. Eventually, I ignored her, climbed the stairs with difficulty, and got inside. After about an hour, I cleaned up, felt a bit calmer, and cautiously went to the old lady's house. I knocked, and she opened the door. I asked her not to tell my parents anything because if my dad knew, he might really hurt the guy. I explained that Happy was just not right in the head, and my dad shouldn't go to jail for someone who's not thinking clearly. She promised not to tell my family, and that was the end of it. Over the next 2 years, he changed again, but this time he wouldn't even look me in the eyes. I would be walking, and he was walking towards me, but he would turn around and go another way, just to avoid passing near me. For the first few months, I was scared that he might be waiting around a corner or something, but it turned out he just didn't want to be seen by me. Even after I moved out, whenever I visit, and even now, 4 years later, he still avoids being seen by me. I hope Happy stays peaceful and doesn't harm any other girls in our neighborhood. But more than anything, I wish for more awareness about mental illness in our country. I hope people can get the right treatments and care they need. People like him really need it. I live on the 6th floor with my family, and we've been here for a long time. The apartment next to ours is owned by a not-so-nice lady who rents it out. But the problem is, she seems to rent it to people who cause a lot of trouble. I'm talking about serious problems, like drug dealers and domestic violence. And this happened a few years ago when I was around 14 or 15 years old. I'm a female, and English isn't my first language, so forgive any grammar mistakes. A couple, probably 35 to 40 years old, had just moved in with their young daughter, who looked about 6 years old. The wife introduced herself, and she seemed nice at first. They mostly kept to themselves, and that was okay with us. But a few weeks after they moved in, things got tricky. They played really loud music during the day and night. It wasn't against the rules, but it bothered us when it went on for hours every day. Then we could hear shouting from their apartment, but it always seemed to be the husband doing the yelling. They started leaving their apartment door open, and when we walked by to use the elevator, they would be walking around in their underwear. It was strange, but we thought maybe it was because it was summer and hot. It became more bothersome when we had guests, as they had to walk past a nearly naked man just hanging out by our door, smoking. Smoking was just another issue. I don't mind weed, as I've also tried it a few times myself, but when they smoked, a lot of smoke would come into our apartment. It was so much that you could see it everywhere. My mom was really bothered because we had a little kid in our apartment, my brother, who was about 4 years old. We didn't want him breathing in smoke every day, but we decided to just deal with it and hope they would move out eventually, like the other people who lived here before. And usually, no one stayed for more than a year. One day, I was coming home after walking with my dogs. We have 2 dogs, a medium-sized one and a small one, both rescued. I unlocked my apartment door, and the dogs went inside. Just as I was about to follow, I heard a hey behind me. I turned around and got scared when I saw who it was. It was the husband. For more information, we hadn't talked before this. He was very close to me, like just inches away from my face. And also, he was only in his underwear. He was taller than me by a lot, so I felt uncomfortable. I asked if he needed something, and then he quickly looked around, as if checking for other people in the small hallway we shared. After that, he came even closer, and I could feel his breath on my face. It smelled like weed, and I tried not to gag so I wouldn't be rude. At that time, I always tried to be nice to everyone, even in risky situations like this. Then, in a rough voice, he whispered, "What do you want?" I was confused. I thought I heard wrong, so I asked him to say it again. "What do you want? Drugs? Alcohol?" My eyes got really big. I was taught not to drink or do drugs, and even if that wasn't the case, I was clearly underage. So I didn't understand why he was offering these things to me. "Oh, no thank you, mister," I said. I had hoped that by being polite, this interaction would be over, and I can go inside. If you're wondering why I didn't just go inside sooner, like I said, I was a major people pleaser, and I didn't want to offend him, but also I didn't know how he would react, as I didn't want to risk him chasing me inside or assaulting me. If he was unstable enough to corner a teenage girl in his underwear and offer her illegal substances, I didn't want to imagine what would have happened if I were to piss him off. "Oh, come on. You must want something, as I can hook you up with whatever." He gave me a wide grin and somehow stepped even closer. I moved my back against the door, realizing I couldn't make more space between us. Then, I let out a nervous laugh. "No thanks. My mom wouldn't like me having that," I said. He tilted his head, still smiling. "Well, is she home now?" Silly me, I said no. She was at work. "Oh, well, then she doesn't need to know. Just tell me what you want." I started breathing really fast. I've had problems with men being mean to me before, so a man standing over me and trapping me made me really anxious. I felt like I might throw up, and I could feel myself starting to shake. I just hoped he wouldn't notice. "No thanks," I said again. I have to go, as I have homework to do." I was trying to smile so he wouldn't know I was scared, but my shaking got worse. He seemed annoyed, but nodded and said to have a nice day. I hurried inside and quietly locked the door. I was breathing hard, and I peeked through the small hole in the door. But he was still there, just staring at my door. He looked like he was out of it, and I hoped he would leave. He stood there for about 30 more seconds, then suddenly turned around and ran into his apartment. I heard him going through cabinets, and in my mind, I thought he might be looking for something to break into my house. Now I was getting really scared. I grabbed my phone, called my dogs, and rushed to the kitchen to get the biggest knife I could find. I sat on the floor and stared at the door while calling my mom. I was almost crying when she answered, and she told me to call the cops if I thought I was in danger. But for some reason, I said no. Maybe I thought I didn't want to bother the police for something that might not be a big deal. My mom couldn't leave work early, but she called the cops as soon as she got home. Meanwhile, his wife had come back home. After a few minutes later, she knocked on our door. My mom answered while I stayed behind her. She asked my mom lots of questions about what I told her and what happened. When my mom explained and said the police were called, the wife nervously laughed and said it wasn't needed. "My husband didn't mean any harm. He was just trying to sell you some CDs he makes, as he really likes music." What? He kept asking me if I wanted alcohol multiple times. How did she start talking about selling CDs? But my mom didn't buy it, and she knows what really happened. She trusts me. The woman's smile turned into an angry face, and she went back into the apartment. We heard her lock the doors, close all the curtains, and turn off the lights. The police arrived shortly after and came inside to hear what happened. Then, they went to their door and knocked, but nobody answered. We told them we saw everyone go inside and lock themselves in, but they couldn't do anything about it because they didn't have a special permission, and no one physically hurt me. They said the man would get a warning, but only when they could reach him. The police left, and we didn't hear anything else from the neighbors all day. We went to bed later. I had trouble falling asleep, but eventually managed to. During the night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a woman screaming. It was loud and really upsetting, and I thought someone might be in trouble. I heard my mom going to the closest window, and then she came to my room and said to stay in bed. I wanted to ask her more about what was happening, but I trusted my mom, so I stayed in bed like she told me. I stayed in my room and eventually fell asleep again. When I woke up, my mom sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that the man from yesterday had jumped out of the window during the night. Since we were on the 6th floor, he probably died when he hit the ground. The screaming we heard was from his wife watching him climb out of the window and then jump, unable to stop him. I felt really bad. I almost started crying, and it made me think that somehow it was my fault. After that incident, my mom felt bad for leaving me home alone to go to work, but she couldn't do much about it because we didn't have a lot of money. I was at home with my little brother because he was sick, and I wasn't going to school because I was too upset. Well, after a few days later when my mom left for work, there was a knocking at the door. I looked through the peephole and I saw it was the guy's wife. She was smoking a cigarette, her eyes were red, and she looked really upset. She was walking around and talking to herself. I told my little brother to go into his room and went to open the door. When I did, and the wife saw me, she started to get really angry and pointed her cigarette near my face. "How dare you? Why did you call the police on my husband? Why? He didn't do anything to you. He just wanted to sell you some CDs, and you reported us. Are you scared of men or something? Are you scared of men in underwear? Is that it?" I couldn't believe what she was saying. If it was me today, I would have told her to go away and shut the door right in her face. But at that time, I was young, not very smart, and too trusting. So what did I do instead? I said sorry. I told her I was sorry about her husband and that I really hoped she could forgive me. "You little piece of shit. You killed my husband. It's all your fault. And I wish that you, your mom, and brother all get sick and die." I looked down at the ground without saying anything, still sure it was my fault. She kept saying mean things, but eventually, she left. I went back inside, locked the doors, and cried. I cried for about half an hour, and my little brother kept asking what was wrong, but I didn't tell him. I've been talking to someone about my feelings and taking medicine for the past year or two. I can say I'm in a better place now. When I spent the night at my friend's house in middle school, we liked staying up late. But the only tricky part was that the bathroom was near his parents' room, and we didn't want to get in trouble for waking them up, especially during those late-night nature calls. So, to avoid any problems, we came up with a plan. Instead of using the bathroom, we quietly sneaked out through the basement door and went into the woods to take care of business. The door was almost always open because we sometimes forgot our keys and got locked out. It happened a lot since we often went out to do things in the woods. On this night, my friend's older brother was around, and he kept barging in through the basement door, making the situation even more chaotic. So, we came up with a plan to try and stop my friend's brother from constantly barging in. We decided to lock the door, even though we knew it wouldn't really keep him out. The idea was that he'd have to use the key, and maybe that would take away some of the fun for him. But around midnight, we heard the door handle jiggling. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just his brother messing around. Then, after about 5 minutes of the handle being jiggled on and off, we got a bit frustrated. That's when we decided to take action. We went up to the door, hit it, and shouted at him to stop. However, all we got in response was silence. That was a good thing, and we hoped it was all over, right? But about 10 minutes later, the jiggling started again, and it kept happening. This whole thing repeated for about 2 hours. No matter how many times we told him to stop, he didn't listen. We got frustrated and just said, "Forget it," and decided to ignore him. Even after we stopped paying attention, he kept going for about half an hour more. It felt like forever. Then finally, he gave up. Let's jump ahead to around 9 in the morning. We were just waking up, and one of my friends needed to use the bathroom. You know how it is at sleepovers. People are sleeping wherever there's space. When one person starts moving around, it wakes everyone up. We all started stretching and heading to the bathroom to get rid of the soda we drank the night before. As I walked out, I grabbed the door handle to close it behind me and noticed it felt weird, like it had a rough texture. When I checked it, I saw that the area around the keyhole was messed up. There were big scratch marks everywhere, and the metal parts were all bent and crooked. I asked my friend who lived there what happened, and he said it was the first time he noticed it. We didn't want to get blamed for what his brother did, so we went upstairs and explained everything to his parents. When his dad went downstairs to see what we were talking about, his face went all pale, and he hurried back upstairs to call the police. It turned out that someone had been trying to force the lock open while we were all in the house. It was pretty scary to think that someone had been trying to get in while we were sleeping. This happened to me more than once on different occasions. What made me really scared this time was that the person knew we were in the house, and we knew someone was trying to break in. But he still kept trying to force his way inside, and it was pretty disturbing. I have no idea what kind of person he was, or what he had in mind for us that night. When I was 19 years old, I had a job in the small mall in my quiet town. In our town, not many serious crimes happen, and it's a peaceful place. However, the city that's about 15 minutes away used to have the highest murder rates in Canada. The mall where I worked was not too big, and it was a common spot for moms with their kids and older people looking to pass the time. It's a really safe mall where I work, not a sketchy one at all. But one day during my break, I headed to the food court to grab a drink and scrolling my phone, just like I always do. As I sat there, I noticed two women walking towards me. My first guess was that they saw my work uniform, and I thought they might have questions about something my store sells. I didn't think anything bad was happening. They walked up to me and sat down quickly at my table in the food court. Both of them talked with strong accents, though I wasn't sure what kind because I hadn't heard it before. They were dressed really fancy, like they were going to church or a special event, and seemed pretty regular. Nothing strange about them. Then one of the women takes out a book, and they start asking me some strange questions like, "Do you go to church? Do you believe in God?" Mostly things about religion. So I think they might be some kind of missionaries. They start telling me about God the Mother. Since I'm really shy, I just listen to them talk. Then, they invite me to a youth group they organized for that evening. I'm a bit surprised, not expecting such an invitation during my break at the mall. I said I was at work, just taking a break, so going with them wasn't possible. But they kept insisting. I had to repeat a few times that I couldn't join. Finally, they got the message, but then they asked for my phone number. They said they'd text me the details the next time they organized something. I felt a bit uneasy, but gave them my number to end the conversation. A couple of days later, I got a text from them, trying to plan something for the youth group. I felt a bit trapped because I wasn't really interested, but I didn't want to be rude. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about whether to reply or not. Eventually, I decided to block the number. It wasn't that I thought they were going to do something bad. I just wasn't into the idea of going to a youth group. I hoped blocking the number would make it clear that I wasn't interested without having to explain it. A few months later, I was reading the news, and there was a story about a warning for young girls in our city regarding a human trafficking scheme. The report mentioned a tactic where women would approach and talk about God the Mother, trying to convince people to leave with them. I felt a rush of relief, realizing that I hadn't finished my shift that day when those women approached me. I wondered what might have happened. Moreover, I was thankful that I never responded to their text. It's strange to think about how a small decision like that might have kept me safe. A couple of years ago, when I was 25, I shared an apartment with one of my best friends. But sadly, our friendship started fading, as she wasn't around much. However, on this particular night, she decided to stay over and went to bed early. Due to my job schedule, I often stayed up late, and during that time, my routine usually involved watching YouTube videos and relaxing. So, on this particular night was pretty normal, but something strange happened. My neighbors actually tried to kidnap me. Now let me share a bit more about where I lived and who my neighbors were. Our house had 3 bedrooms, and the 2 bedrooms, along with the kitchen, faced the neighbors, who were a young couple residing in a smaller mill house. They kept showing up at our door, always asking for weird stuff. I'm usually cool with helping neighbors, but these requests were kinda odd. For example, they wanted us to fill up this old Mountain Dew bottle with water because theirs got turned off or something. They also asked for beer, and one time they literally asked us for just $1. It was getting a bit weird. When we didn't answer, I'd peek through the window to check. It was strange. Sometimes I'd catch them grabbing leftover cigarette butts from the ashtray or squishing their eyes against the door peephole, trying to see if we were home. So I'm sitting on the couch, watching YouTube when I hear a knock at the door. I rolled my eyes because I knew exactly who was knocking. It was 11 p.m., and when I checked through the little door window, there he was, the boyfriend on my porch. Normally I'd just ignore it and go on with my night, but this time he looked kind of troubled. So I decided to open the door and see what was up. Hey, I just wanted to ask if you could do me a favor. I got a ring here in my pocket for my girlfriend, and I need someone to record the moment. Can you follow me to my backyard and film it for me? He nervously asked. It was unexpected. I was pretty confused, but really wanted to find out what was happening. I congratulated him and told him I'd join in a moment. I just needed to put on my shoes. Once I closed and locked the door, I rushed to the back room with a view of their backyard. Peeking through the blinds, I expected to see some decorations or a setup, but it was totally dark, no signs of anything. It felt odd, so without wasting time, I woke up my roommate to share the whole story with her. No way, she told me, and we both walked back to the door after the boyfriend started banging on it. I peeked through the little door window again. It was pretty dark outside, and I couldn't see much. Then, I saw him move his eye away from the peephole. It gave me a chill, and I quickly turned around, pressing my back against the door. My roommate hurried back to the door from her room, grabbing 2 wire hangers like they were shields. We both clung to the hangers and sat against the door until he finally left. It was pretty scary, but we wanted to be sure we weren't overreacting. So we decided to go out through the back door and hopped into her car for a quick drive around the neighborhood. They always kept their front door wide open, and there were no blinds, so you could easily see inside their house. We drove by slowly in her car, sneaking into the living room. On the couch, the couple and the older man were all just sitting there, staring at the wall. We quickly drove away and decided to stay at a friend's house that night. After that, I stopped answering the door for them. But one day, when I came home from work, I noticed an older lady parked in their driveway. As I got out of my car, she walked up to me and asked if I knew where the neighbors were. I explained that I hadn't seen them in quite a while. Then I asked her who she was, and she informed me that she was the owner of the house. She told me they hadn't paid rent for months, and it led to her having to evict them. When she went inside the house, it was a disaster. Needles scattered, garbage all over, walls with holes, and even a mess on the floor. I expressed my sympathy for what she had to deal with and mentioned that I was glad they were finally out. But thinking about the condition of their house, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't followed him to the backyard. And who knows what he might have had planned that night. It was my time to go out with my kids for Halloween. Last year, my wife did it, and we switch every year. My son is 7, and my daughter is 9, and they were super excited, all dressed up in their cool costumes. I usually stay on the street, keeping an eye on them while they run from house to house for candy. After about 30 minutes of walking, we reached a really good spot for getting lots of candy, a busy street in our neighborhood. There were so many cool decorations and things in people's front yards, so I got a little distracted, and I wasn't paying close attention to my kids. Then a few minutes later, they came back from a house with another girl who was about the same height as my daughter. But the interesting thing was, she had this really weird homemade mask on. It looked like it was made from some kind of cardboard or similar material. Then my daughter asked if her new friend could come along for trick-or-treating. I said, of course. So we all went together as a group. I didn't know much about the girl, but I guessed she might be a friend from school or somewhere. As we walked, I noticed a really tall man following us. He was big, and I started to feel a bit uneasy. I couldn't figure out if he was just enjoying the decorations too, or if something else was going on. He had this mask that looked like an angry cat, which kind of gave me the shivers. Then I thought he might be the girl's dad, so I tried to start a little conversation with him. I said something like, nice weather, huh? But he didn't reply. He just stood there, staring at me with that creepy cat mask, while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe he's just not a talkative person. I asked again, saying, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He just nodded, but he still didn't say anything. I thought maybe he's just not into talking, so I stopped trying to chat with him. We kept going for about 15 more minutes, going to different houses and collecting more candy. Then, my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This surprised me because we hadn't been out for too long, and their bags were only about a third full. Anyway, I said okay. We waved goodbye to the man with the cat mask and his daughter, then started going home. But the strange part was, when I looked back at them, they were just standing there, staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they were still standing there, not moving at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So, who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a really confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied, looking pretty confused too. I was puzzled because I didn't recognize the girl, and it seemed odd that my daughter thought she was my friend. I asked her what she meant by that. Turns out the girl with the cardboard mask had come up to my kids. She told my daughter that she was a friend of mine, and explained that she was too shy to ask me directly if she could join us for trick-or-treating. So she hoped my daughter could ask me on her behalf. I didn't know the girl, but it seemed like a misunderstanding. Maybe she thought she knew me or got confused. Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any friends who are kids. What my daughter said next truly surprised me and sent a chill down my spine. She explained that when the girl with the cardboard mask first came up to them, she wasn't even wearing the mask. So they saw her face, and it wasn't someone familiar. I couldn't understand why the girl would say she was my friend if we didn't even recognize each other. Later, we found out that she wasn't a girl at all. She was actually an older woman about my age with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing is that this older woman had been quietly taking treats from my daughter's bag when I wasn't looking. That's why they wanted to go home, because they noticed the woman taking their candies. I brought my kids home and explained everything to my wife. We checked through all their candy, looking closely, but we didn't find anything suspicious or strange. We didn't call the police or anything because, well, nothing really bad happened. But now thinking about it, I kind of wish we had made a different choice. It's really weird that some people on Halloween wear masks to pretend to be kids. I'm a 22-year-old French student, currently pursuing my master's degree in Amsterdam. I live on my own in an apartment within a student-only building. The neighborhood is calm and nice, with the occasional sounds of trams passing by, or the distant noise of parties in other student buildings. But one night, it was around 10 o'clock, when I heard a knock on my apartment door. I live on the 3rd floor, and to reach my front door, you have to use a key to open the main entrance, and then another key to open the door to my hallway. This means that only people with a key can come in. If someone wants to visit, they can give me a call or ring my doorbell, and I'll open the door for them. It adds an extra layer of security to our building, ensuring that only authorized people can access our floors. On a regular day, when I heard someone knocking on my door, I usually open the door without much thought, whether it's my landlord checking in or a neighbor asking for something. As I've mentioned, I generally feel safe in my building, and I can take care of myself if needed. But this time, for some reason, I had an uneasy feeling. It's not that I felt in immediate danger, but something felt off. At first, I didn't do anything, as I figured the person would go away. I had just finished my assignment and wanted some peace, but the knocking didn't stop. I stayed put, thinking they'd leave soon, and I could finally relax after my hard work. However, the knocking continued for a good 30 seconds. So I decided to speak up and said, "Hello?" The voice replied in English, saying, "It's Uber Eats." It seemed strange because most people here usually speak Dutch, and I recognized the voices of those who live on my floor. But it wasn't a neighbor or my landlord. The person claimed to be from Uber Eats, but the thing is, I didn't order anything from Uber Eats that day. It made me feel a bit confused. Also, the voice sounded strange, like maybe someone playing a prank or a neighbor trying to trick me. It was a deep voice, maybe around 40 years old, and definitely sounded like a person who smokes a lot. I said, "I didn't order anything. You might have the wrong address." But a few seconds later, the knocking kept going, and the same voice said, "I'm pretty sure you did. I have an order under your name." Now, that made me panic. I looked around and grabbed a baseball bat, just in case he tried to break the door because the knocking was getting louder and stronger. I checked if the door was locked, and to my horror, it wasn't. I was only 10 centimeters away from him, and my front door was the only thing keeping him from coming in. But luckily, the door didn't open from the outside without a key, even though it wasn't locked. So I took a step back and asked again, "What's the name?" He seemed to be thinking for a few seconds, and then there was another loud knock. It felt like he was really angry and frustrated. Then after a few minutes, he gave up and went down the emergency stairs next to my apartment. The steps were really loud, and it seemed like the person was in a big hurry. I wasn't sure what he wanted or what might happen if I opened the door. I still don't get how he got through the first 2 doors. Then I thought if he tried knocking on other doors before mine. So I shared the incident on our building's WhatsApp group, asking if anyone else had seen something unusual. It turns out, nobody witnessed anything suspicious, and no one had opened the door for anyone else. But I'm fortunate that my instincts kicked in, warning me not to open the door. At the age of 21, I moved in with my cousin in a house nestled deep in the woods. Our home was in a place called Van Leer, situated between Dixon and Erin, Tennessee, surrounded by dense forests, and living there meant being a good 45 minutes away from the nearest city. It's like the smallest town you've ever seen. Picture this. You can zip through the whole place in just 2 minutes and wave hi to all 12 local shops. Beyond that, it's mostly farms, breaking up the big patches of woods in between. Oh, and there's this random gas station stuck right in the middle of a fork in the road, pointing towards where I live. Sometimes you'll catch a glimpse of cows or horses grazing in the fields. It's a quiet place, with only a few people buzzing around, and everyone knows everyone else. I moved in with my cousin in November of 2011, a week before my birthday. Sometimes we had parties, but most days we just did our own thing when we weren't working, playing video games and watching movies together. The house was made by the people who lived there before us, and they let us stay for only $250 a month. That was just enough to cover the taxes on the house each year. The house had 3 bedrooms. The main bedroom was downstairs next to the living room. There was also the back room, which used to be an open porch before they put up full walls. Upstairs was the loft where I slept. All the bedrooms and bathrooms were on one side of the house, and on the other side, there was the kitchen and living area. We hung out a lot in the living room with our TVs and game systems. They were all on a 12-foot wall between the doors, so there wouldn't be any glare from the windows. We also had our meals in the living area. This brings me to one of my tasks. I had to take out the kitchen scraps and dump them at the edge of the woods, about half a football field away from the front porch. And I did this almost every day for many months after moving in, because it meant I didn't have to wash the dishes. When I went out to dump the scraps, I got used to seeing raccoons, possums, deer, rabbits, and sometimes even foxes or coyotes. At first, the coyotes made me a bit nervous because all I could see were their eyes, or I'd hear sniffing and panting while walking to the dumping spot. Nothing ever really bothered me, you know. They all knew that once I dropped the food and walked away, it was free for them to grab. But in September 2012, I started having a new visitor who showed up regularly, and this one was way bigger than any coyote or dog I knew. I went out like always to toss out the scraps from dinner that night, but it was strangely quiet. No coyotes howling, no raccoons or possums making their usual sounds. As I walked, I felt the hairs on my arms stand up, but I figured it was just because it was getting colder. And maybe that's why there were fewer animals around. But when I got to the dumping spot and poured out the scraps, something really big growled at me, and I could feel it deep in my bones. So I quickly finished scraping out the pot and slowly stepped back from the line of trees. I noticed a pair of yellowish eyes reflecting a little to the left of where I dumped the scraps. I kept staring at it as I moved backward, never taking my eyes off the creature. When I got inside, I told my cousin that there was a big animal out there tonight. I suggested we keep the porch light on to watch it in case it comes too close to the house. The rest of the night was quiet, but after that, whenever I took out the scraps, that creature would be there, waiting for me to drop the food and step back. Its growl always gave me the chills. I never saw more than its eyes, and after about a month, it stopped growling when I came out, even though I could still see it watching me from the woods. Fast forward to December. The ground was all covered in snow, and it got really cold. I kept giving food to that creature thing, even when Christmas came around. Then me and my cousin went to stay with family for the holidays, and we were away for about a week. When we came back, we had lots of extra food. After bringing everything inside and getting comfortable, my cousin fell asleep on the couch in the living room, and I went to bed in my room upstairs. That night, I woke up feeling thirsty and went downstairs to get some water. As I was going down the stairs, I heard a little thumping noise from downstairs. Peeking over the railing and seeing my cousin still asleep on the couch, I thought maybe something was on the porch. Sometimes raccoons or turkeys would show up. But when I looked through the big glass doors, I didn't see anything. It was really cold, like 7 degrees, so I didn't open the doors. I went into the kitchen while still keeping an eye on the doors in the living room. That's when I saw something, a head like a big dog poking around the side of the door. The head was really big, and it started sniffing against the glass door. I got a little scared when I saw it, but then I thought it was just a really big dog, maybe the one I'd been giving food to for the past few months, so I started to feel more relaxed. Remembering I was away for a week, I thought that the thing might be hungry, so I took some turkey from the fridge, planning to throw it out the kitchen door onto the porch for it to eat. But when I turned back from the fridge and looked at the door, I froze. At first, when I saw its head, it was about 3 feet off the ground, but now I was looking up at the creature's face. It was standing on 2 legs, way taller than me. It had to bend down to look through the door. I'm 6 feet tall, and my cousin is 6'5". His head just about touches the top of his door frame, so this creature was easily 7 feet tall. I was shocked and couldn't move, really scared. What scared me even more was that the thing reached for the door handle to the sliding glass door and started pulling on it. My heart was beating fast, and I heard the frame hitting against the door lock. But good thing we hadn't unlocked them since we got home. Right then, my cousin started waking up. He rolled off the couch, still half asleep, and walked towards the bathroom. That's when he saw me standing frozen in front of the glass door near the kitchen. He was about to say something when he noticed the dark figure at our door. The creature looked at him and growled. My eyes went back and forth between the two before I stepped closer to the kitchen door. My cousin, stuck in one spot, was really scared by what he saw. I grabbed the kitchen door handle and unlocked it. My cousin, barely making a sound, asked me in a whisper what on earth I was doing. I yanked the door open and quickly tossed the plate of turkey outside, then slammed the door and locked it. The creature saw the food flying towards the yard, gave me one more look, and leaped off the porch to get the food. My cousin grabbed me and took me upstairs to the loft bedroom, which had a strong door. We stayed in that room all night, listening for any sounds. After a few minutes, we could hear it trying the door again, sniffing its nose against the window. It tapped on the window for a few minutes when it found out the door wouldn't open. Eventually, it went away and vanished into the woods. The next morning, I took the scraps out, but I was too scared to go all the way to the woods. Even though this werewolf thing didn't really act mean to us, I was too scared to go outside at night after that. Sometimes we'd see something in the yard at night, usually close to where I threw the scraps. Each time we spotted it, we'd turn off the TVs and lights and watch until it went back into the woods. Even though we don't know exactly what it is, but having something like this around as a neighbor is both fascinating and scary. I'm 15 years old, and my family and I just moved into a new house. While we were unpacking, I noticed our neighbors watching us from their homes. Following my family's advice to be kind, I waved to greet them. However, I felt nervous when I saw a man in his 30s staring at me, and when he noticed me waving, his grin grew wide, making me uncomfortable. I went inside and checked out our new house. It was huge. When I got to my room, I noticed it had a pretty good view of the front yard. The only thing was, people outside could see into my room too. My mom didn't like that, but I kept arguing with her until she let me keep that room. Since it was summer vacation, my mom kept bugging me to come outside and play baseball, as she really wanted me to enjoy the nice weather and make new friends in the neighborhood. So I grabbed my baseball stuff and went outside to play with my brothers and dad. When I glanced at the apartments across the road, I saw the guy from before. He seemed a little creepy, but he was all by himself. I asked my dad if it was okay to invite him to play with us. My dad, who tends to trust people easily, said, "Go ahead." So I crossed the street and walked up to the guy. I asked him what his name was, and he said it was Austin. I asked Austin if he wanted to join our baseball game, and he said, "Sure, as long as you're playing." We had a good time playing together. When the game finished, Austin went back to his place across the street, waving and smiling at me. The next day, my parents and brothers went out to pack more stuff. Since I didn't feel like going, I stayed home alone, and I decided to unpack some things in my room. At one point, I remembered that I forgot to lock the door like my mom told me. As I was heading to the living room, I heard the front door open and close. I thought it might be my mom or dad, so I was about to call their names, but a weird feeling made me stop. I stayed quiet and sneaked my way to the corner, peeking into the living room. To my surprise, it wasn't Mom or Dad. It was Austin. He had come inside and locked the door behind him. As soon as I noticed that, I got scared and ran straight into my room. I hid inside my closet, but I could hear his footsteps getting closer. He came into my room, opened the drawers of my dresser, and started searching. Then, he left the room and went back down the hallway. I peeked out of the closet and saw all my underwear scattered on the floor. I walked quietly behind him in the hallway, hoping he wouldn't see me. I really wished he would just go to another room. He turned and opened the bathroom door, and I wasn't sure what he was searching for in there. As soon as the hallway was clear, I didn't waste any time. I sprinted as fast as I could through the front door. And then I quickly ran to the neighbor's house nearby. I was so scared. When I got there, I started crying and told them everything. They were really nice and called the police right away. They kept me inside until the police arrived. The police looked around, but they couldn't find Austin. Since that day, I haven't seen him again. When I was about 10 years old, we lived next to a lady who was a bit strange. She had long black hair and really pale skin. She didn't come out of her house much, so we called her the Vampire Lady. We didn't know her name because she was so quiet. But whenever someone walked by her house, she would always stare at them. The lady's house always looked dark inside, even at night. And sometimes, my mom or brothers saw strange things happening there. We weren't sure what was going on. We just noticed weird lights flickering, like in a horror movie about Frankenstein. One night, my friend Jess came for a sleepover. I told Jess about the weird lady across the street. Jess thought it would be a good idea to go see what was happening in the house when everyone else was asleep. I didn't really want to, but I said yes. I knew we had to be super quiet because my mom wakes up easily. She wouldn't let me go out in the dark at my age. Somehow, we sneaked outside without making any noise. Now we just had to cross the street to get to the house. Jess tried to look inside through the windows, and as soon as she did, she grabbed my arm. "Come on, let's go now," she said quietly but firmly. "What? We just got here. What's wrong?" I asked as she pulled me, running back across the street. She didn't tell me what she saw until we were back inside the house. Once she locked the door, she said that when she looked through the window, she saw something that looked like a video camera with a small blinking light. I said we should just go to bed and talk about it in the morning. I wish I could say that's where the story ended, but it didn't. Around 3 in the morning, Jess and I were still trying to sleep when suddenly Jess started screaming. I had a bunk bed, so I climbed up to see what was happening. That's when I saw the camera lens from earlier, now looking into our bedroom window. My mom and brothers rushed into my room with the lights on, which must have scared the person with the camera. So I told my mom that someone was looking inside. My mom grabbed a bat from my brother's room and went outside, looking around for a few minutes. When she came back, my mom asked us what the person looked like. Jess and I could only describe the camera lens. We didn't see the person, but in our hearts, we felt it was the lady from across the street, even though we didn't have any proof. My mom was a bit mad that we waited until the morning to tell her how we knew it was the woman. Since then, we weren't allowed near her house, and I still sometimes have bad dreams about what happened. A few years ago, I traveled solo backpacking in France, a 21-year-old female. I took a day trip to Versailles from Paris. To go there and come back, I had to use 2 different trains. But unfortunately, when I was returning from Versailles, my phone battery was very low, only around 3%. so I put my phone on airplane mode and low power. I had my headphones on, even though I wasn't listening to anything. A random guy, let's call him John, came and sat next to me. I had been walking in the gardens all day and didn't feel like talking to anyone. So, I pretended I didn't understand French. John then took out his phone and used Google Translate, asking if I wanted to learn French. I replied with a simple, "No, thank you," and tried to put my headphones back on to make it clear I wasn't up for chatting. However, he kept asking me questions through his phone. The next thing he asked was, "Where are you sleeping?" I didn't feel comfortable sharing my real plans, so I fibbed and told him I was staying in a large hotel with my family and that I was on my way back to them. He wanted to know where I was going, and all I told him was, Paris. Then he asked if I was getting off at a specific subway stop, and I lied again, saying yes. He suggested he'd come along with me. I didn't feel comfortable with that, so I firmly said no and cut the conversation short. To avoid further interaction, I quickly put my headphones on, signaling that I wanted to be left alone. Ignoring him completely, he eventually got the message and left me alone for a couple of minutes. After that, he answered a call on his phone and told his friend, "Yeah, I'll get off at X stop, and you go to Y stop." This made me really nervous because Y stop was exactly where I intended to get off. When we reached the transfer station, he stood up, left the train, and positioned himself by the doors, waiting for me. I took a long time to stand up, making sure I had all my things, and I did it in a way that was kind of annoying on purpose. After that guy left to catch the other train, I took my time getting off and onto the next train. I moved really slowly. I got on the train right at the front, and I kept an eye on everyone around me to make sure no one was acting strange or watching me too much. I probably seemed a bit strange to them because of how cautious I was being. When I reached X stop and kept an eye on the people getting off and on the train, and anyone on the platform, I didn't see him or anyone looking at me too much. When we got to Y stop, I got off with the crowd, turned the corner, and there he was with 4 friends, checking out everyone who was coming out. So I quickly turned around and went the opposite way. I let my hair down from its bun and tried to look different. Once I got off the train, I ran back to my hostel. I stayed there and only went out if one of my roommates was with me. My first job was at a tiny pizza place in the town where I grew up. It's a really small town, with just a bit over 1,000 people. We're located right next to a main highway, and it takes about 30 minutes to get to a big city from there. One evening, around September or October, I was working with 2 other coworkers and our manager. The whole shift had been pretty slow, not many customers. We were just wrapping up and getting ready to close up shop at 9 p.m. when 2 men and a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old, walked into the pizza place. I walked up to the front and asked if they needed any help or if they were planning to order something. The shorter man, one of the 2, mentioned they were just passing through. Then he started asking about the prices of different items on the menu, and he also asks what time we close. So I tell him, and he just says okay, and heads over to sit down with the little girl at a booth. The taller man steps outside and goes to their car parked in front of the pizza place. From where I'm standing, I can see him looking around as if checking something. Meanwhile, inside, the little girl seems excited, pointing at the pictures on the menu. About 5 minutes later, the smaller man gets up, leans down to whisper something to the little girl, and then heads towards the exit. My coworkers and I are just watching everything and talking about how strange it seems. Then, the little girl starts dancing around to the music playing on the radio. After a couple of minutes of her dance, I walk up to her and ask if she's hungry, or if she wants something to drink. She says she just wants water. So I grab a cup, fill it with water, and hand it to her. She takes the water back to her seat at the booth and sits down. I go up to her and ask, "Who are you waiting for?" She smiles and says, "My dad." My coworkers and I exchange concerned glances because the two men haven't returned, and it's now 9:20 p.m. We're starting to wonder if neither of them is really her dad. My manager, noticing our worry, decides it's time to take action. She picks up the phone and calls the police to let them know about the situation. Our town is too small for its own police station, so we have to wait for them to come from the next town, which takes at least 15 minutes. I go over to sit with her at the booth. I'm just chatting with her, making sure she's okay, and nothing goes wrong before the cops arrive. While we're talking, she suddenly stands up and says she has to go. My manager and I try to tell her she has to stay in the restaurant until her dad comes back, but she starts crying and yelling and really wants to leave. Later, my manager told me the police found her walking alone down the road that night. We didn't hear anything more about what happened after that. I just hope she's safe. Three years back, my wife and I bought our first house in the fancy part of the city, and we picked a place near my mom's house, since she's been on her own since my dad passed away. My mom was born in South Africa before there was a vaccine for polio, and she got affected by the disease. She can't move her legs, so she's been using crutches or a wheelchair all her life. My wife and I really wanted a house near hers, so that we could visit her a lot and take care of her. We also wanted to make sure she can be independent and do her own stuff without feeling like we're always watching her. I always worried about something happening to my mom, so it made me feel better knowing I could quickly go to her place to help, no matter if it was a small issue or a big problem. But one summer night in 2019, something bad happened, which I wasn't ready for. In the middle of the summer, I drove my mom to the airport, as she was going to South Africa to see her sister and my cousins. Because my older brother lives in another city and I'm close by, I took on the job of looking after her house while she was away. So I made sure to visit twice a week. It became my routine to water the plants, pick up the mail, check the answering machine, and do all the usual things that need doing in a house. I wanted to make sure everything was in order for when she came back home. Thankfully, a year ago, I got a security system for my mom's house. It's like having a helper that keeps an eye on things even when I'm not there. I set it up so I can use my phone to see what's happening at her place anytime. If a window or door is opened, or if something sets off the alarm, my phone lets me know immediately. I made sure to put everything in for security, except cameras. And later in the story, I'd regret not having them. But in my own house, I have cameras everywhere, inside and outside. They watch over everything, from my motorcycle in the garage to my snoozing dog in the living room. Fast forward a month. I finished work, hit the gym, watched a movie with my wife, and got ready for bed. Nothing unusual so far, right? But just after 2 in the morning, my phone started making a noise. I thought it might be an email or something from Instagram, so I ignored it. I really value my sleep, as I usually get around 5 hours a night. After I started dozing off, my phone kept making noise again and again. My wife woke up and said, "Turn it off. I'm trying to sleep." She often teased me about keeping the volume on at night, but I do it just in case of an emergency, or if my mom needs us. I'm glad I didn't turn the volume off, because when I tried to check the notifications, it hit me suddenly, like a car crashing through my living room. I got a bunch of messages from the security system at my mom's house. Right then, the company watching the system calls my phone, and I pick up. The lady on the phone tells me that the home alarm is going off because the motion detector in the basement noticed movement several times. Then she says they've sent security people to check on my mom's house to make sure everything's okay. While I was on the phone with the lady, I checked the message again from the security system. I could see what she was telling me. I also looked at the locks on my mom's doors, and the system said they were all locked. Without looking more, I suddenly understood. Someone or something is inside the house right now. Remember, I was suddenly woken up from sleep and told that maybe someone broke into my mother's house. I was still half asleep, and I didn't have time to clear the fog in my mind. Because of that, I jumped to the wrong conclusion, and I thought my mother could be in danger. I quickly got out of bed and ran to the garage. I only paused to put on my shoes and grab my car keys. It was good I had pajama pants on because it was a cold night. I didn't stop to pick up a shirt, jacket, or any kind of weapon. I was in a hurry to reach my mother's place. Luckily, I had a strong flashlight in my car, like the ones the police use, which I usually bring for exploring around the city. So I grabbed the flashlight, placed it on my lap, started the car, and pushed the gas pedal down fast. I went way faster than the speed limit in the neighborhood to get to the house in a hurry. Trying to drive like a racer really wakes you up. When I reached my mom's house, I saw that all the lights were still off, exactly how I had left them. The alarm was so loud that it hurt my ears. People from nearby houses started coming outside, but there were no security patrol cars in sight. I ran to the front door while unlocking it from my phone. But when I yanked the door open, I found myself staring into the dark entryway of my mother's house. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I couldn't move. I was frozen with fear. Despite being 25 years old at the time, I had never faced anything so frightening before. I've been through some pretty intense and crazy stuff before, even situations where my life was at risk. But nothing scared me as much as looking into what I was sure was the entrance to really scary things that happened in my childhood home. Just to note, at this moment, while standing at the door, my brain still hadn't reminded me that my mom was safe, chilling at my aunt's beach house in South Africa. With the thought of my mom in my head, my bravery kicked in. Step by step, I went into the house. I think my body's fight or flight switch got stuck on fight because I went searching instead of checking my mom's room. I literally hit the switch that turns on the lights in the basement, ready for a big fight. But, you know what? To this day, I'm not sure if it was a huge relief or if I was terrified. Because when I looked around, there was absolutely nothing there. Not a single thing. I looked around where I was standing. The windows in the main part of the basement were fine. The lights from the motion detector were blinking, and my phone was buzzing to tell me about my own movements in the house. Then I realized, standing out in the open in the basement wasn't a smart thing to do. So I ran back upstairs, turning on all the lights in the kitchen as I went. I grabbed the biggest knife from the block. Then I went to my mother's room. I checked every corner, doorway, closet, and even under each piece of furniture. I did it slowly and carefully, making sure everything was okay, until I felt sure the main floor of the house was safe. I was sure the person who shouldn't be there must be in the basement. I took out my phone and turned off the home alarm so I could listen carefully. Then I checked the main room again, under the pool table, behind the couch, and even in the bathroom, but found nothing. But as I turned to go down the hallway, I saw the door to the guest bedroom was closed. I couldn't remember if I had closed it before or during another visit, so I walked up to the door slowly, trying my best to hear any sound. I grabbed the door handle and pulled it open. I can't be sure, but I might have gotten really scared. When I saw someone at the other end of the room with a big knife, I had to try my hardest not to faint. I was really scared, but I knew I had to do something. I gathered my courage bit by bit and reached for the light switch, ready to fight the intruder. The light came on, and I dropped to my knees, crying. That's when I realized I was looking at my own reflection. The closet door in the bedroom had mirrored panels, and in the dark, they made me see something that looked like a scary person. Then I heard a car door close outside. The guy who claimed to be a security officer was standing there, but he looked younger than me, If you imagine the word intimidating in your mind, this man was the opposite. He was a bit chubby, smiling, and had a really young-looking face. He looked more like someone welcoming you into a house. I checked my watch, and the man had come a whole hour after I told the security company to send someone. I told the guy that I searched every part of the house and didn't find anything. I started to wonder not-so-nice thoughts about how useless this guy, pretending to be a security officer. But I'm a bit embarrassed about those thoughts now. Then, he asked me if I checked the garage. My clever grin disappeared quickly. I reached for the button in my car that opens the garage door. The garage is an open space, and it's really hard to hide in there. I walked through, peeked inside the car, and then left the garage. I felt sure it was empty. The security officer gave me some papers to sign. Basically, it said he did come when the home alarm went off. I told him about the basement motion detector, showing lots of times where it recorded movement. Then I saw his face go pale, as he explained that the detectors his company uses don't just sense movement, but also check for changes in temperature in the room to avoid false reports of movement. After telling me this, he got into his car and drove away. I locked up the house, turned on the outside lights, and set the security system again. I leaned against my car, looking at the house, trying to figure out how the alarm could have gone off. It's supposed to work when it senses movement and heat, but there didn't seem to be anyone around. The very next day, I made sure to get security cameras installed outside the house, in the garage, and where the motion detectors were placed. It's been 2 years since that night, and I haven't shared this incident with my mom, brother, or my wife. I'm still puzzled. Was there really someone there? Or was there some weird reason for the alarm going off? I really hope I never have to experience that again. Sometimes not knowing the answer is the better choice. I met this guy while I was still with my boyfriend, but despite being 10 years older than me, if I recall correctly, he wasn't someone I found attractive. We only had about 20 minutes of conversation, and it was all very impersonal and polite exchanges. I only talked to him when it was absolutely necessary. It was just basic talk, nothing more. Well, my boyfriend and I started dating, and somehow that other guy knew about it. One night, when we were excited to go to the club together, we noticed that this guy was following us. It made me nervous, and I started freaking out. I ran to the bathroom with my friend for safety, while our boyfriend turned around to talk to him. That guy, however, started acting really immature, like a 5-year-old boy. He even started crying, and then ran away, leaving the nightclub. Then about a month later, I found a disturbing love letter in my mailbox. It was creepy because he had delivered it himself to my house, meaning that this guy had followed me to my door before and found out where I live. Fast forward 1 year, and I don't go to the place I met him anymore because he practically lives there. My friends told me he hangs out there every day, almost like he's waiting for me to show up. We moved after a while, and during that summer at the new place, I started noticing that guy at the mall. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then a shop owner I know well tells me that the guy's been following me, and even hides when I turn around. That really worried me. So I shared the whole story with the shop owner. He was concerned too, and promised to let other store owners know about the situation. He also assured me that he would call security the next time if he sees that creepy guy following me. I now have my own first professional level full-time stalker, and my boyfriend and I were clueless about what to do. My family was just as lost, and we were super worried. The police couldn't do much since this guy wasn't doing anything harmful at the time. It's been well over 2 years, and things are tough. I don't want to work as a waitress even though I really need the money, because I know he would find out where I work and then sit there all day and night just watching me. I try not to work anywhere near the place I first met this guy, especially around the city center. Going to the mall alone is a no-go for me now. I always bring my boyfriend along. There are specific supermarkets and cafes I steer clear of because I know he hangs out there, hoping to see me. It's disturbing because I don't even know his last name, but he has a strange control over where I can go or not. I really wish I could leave the city, but it's not easy. Even if I manage to go somewhere else, he knows both my first and last name, and all I know about him is his first name and what he looks like. It's kind of scary because he could find me easily. The situation might get even riskier once I finish university. I'm aiming for a teaching position, and they put all your information on the internet. So it makes me worry about my safety and what he might do. Thank you for listening till the end. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to give us a like. Also, if you have any personal experiences while being home alone, or any other scary or creepy experiences you would like to share, feel free to contact us.